are these people?
So I was like re-listening to the speech and listen to it a little bit more detail, and like you kind of get a picture going through it of how I think it's like a more nuanced take, but I still think like there's some pretty glaring issues and problematic issues with not only voting for a Democrat but voting for a Kennedy, considering their history. So do you see my notes with the timestamps?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can just start, so basically kind of start off. I want to kind of outline. He kind of goes through this thing where he, in kind of like the first half, he talks about how Americans are struggling and appeals to the kind of the, for lack of a better term, like the dissenters over the last 2 or 3 years, the people who are like against getting the jab, people who are against the lockdowns, all that stuff. He's appealing to those people as a Democrat, so that's really important. So yeah,
which is weird, right? Like I wouldn't. That surprises me that like a Democratic base is actually for him. Is that like really what a political dynasty is able to do?
What do you mean?
Just gather up a bunch of DNC votes just because you have Kennedy.
So I mean, I think what they're trying. I think what the big picture is, and we'll go through the video. But I think what the big picture is that there's 100 million people who don't vote, and I think that there's a correlation between the people who don't vote and the people who are really skeptical of the government. So you have RFK, who for the last 2 or 3 years has been like, hey, you know, the jabs were bad news. We had bad COVID policy. We had bad lockdown policy. But I'm not that guy. You know, he's able to pull in all those non-voters because the United States has terrible voter turnout. You know, we're like 40% or something. It's really bad. So I think it's a lot like kind of Bernie with his social issues. RFK is targeting a non-voter demographic, I think.
It's a brand. Like that's all like politics is now. Like that's what I felt like.
It's a brand, but that's where I also come in, and I think that that's more of like kind of an op. Like,
yeah.
So it's just sad because it's like, okay, was RFK for the last 2 or 3 years, was he being like sincere about this stuff, or was it all like to get to this point where now he's running for president and it's just like,
well, it's to sell more books. That's why Marianne's running too. They want to sell more books.
Yeah. So
the biggest problem, I mean, there's a lot of things that I like about his platform, to be honest with you. But
well, so it started off at
52 or one.
Yeah, started off at 52 because I think this just kind of starts off saying like he's appealing to what would be like if I voted, he's appealing to like my demographic.
You cannot do it unless you have a big middle class, and we had that. But since the early 1980s, there's been a systematic attack on our middle class, and the coup de grace was the lockdown. The lockdown was the biggest shift in wealth in human history, and I'm going to tell you about that in a second. And I blame President Trump for the lockdown. Now, a lot of people say, and President Trump gets blamed for a lot of things that he didn't do, and he gets blamed for some things that he did do. But the worst thing that he did to this country, to our civil rights, to our economy, to the middle class in this country, was the lockdown.
But that was like on the state level, like even DeSantis.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it really wasn't because you had like companies like Amazon or like Starbucks and stuff that put in, or like Target. There were businesses that incorporated lockdown policy or like the masking and stuff. So like states' rights, federal government, I think it's kind of like hard to say. Like I was like, I don't know, what were the lockdowns like where you were at? Like in Colorado, it was like 2 weeks, I think, but like my
I live in a blue
my ex's daughter was doing freaking online school for 2 years. You know, like when I was working at call center, I was getting people who from all over the country, people canceling their service because like everybody got sent home. You know, so even though it was only like a few weeks, it was like really, really fucking bad. Like, I don't know if people really like remember how bad it was when they told everybody to fucking go home for what, like 15 days to stop the spread or something like that. Wasn't that what it was?
Yeah, 10 days.
Yeah, but so it was really bad. It ravaged the country in a very short period of time, and that was when the CARES Act went out, the PPP loans went out. So like I think he's right about the lockdowns having a really, really deleterious effect.
No, absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
But what's important here is that that's an anti-establishment position. So the important takeaway here is like the way I see it is he's appealing as a Democrat to making an anti-establishment opinion as a Democrat is unusual, right? Like that, I think that's something to consider. Like, why is he doing that? Why is he running as an independent?
Well, you'll have like these like popular types like pop up. I mean, you could like make the same comparison like Marion Williamson,
Mm-hmm.
like
Absolutely.
right.
But that's why I think that it's all like, I mean, it just kind of goes back, like I think that the DNC is more or less just like fucking op, and it's just like about hurting people to kind of vote for.
They already said last year they're allowed to pick their own candidates.
Well, yeah, and we didn't even talk about it, but
I don't know what the plan is.
They just canceled all their debates too. I don't think they're having any debates.
They just canceled all his debates, and to be fair, even if he gets that close to the nomination, he's gonna end up like his uncle, and they're just gonna fucking shoot him in the head because that's what they do to people, to political dissent.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, that's. I think. I mean,
to one.
We can't. Well, let me just make one more. I think at the end of the day, like he is there to endorse Biden, like full stop. I don't think he's like seriously like throwing his hat in the ring as a Democrat. I don't think he like, especially with the debates being canceled. I like was so soon after he announced. I'm kind of wondering if like he knew that the debates were never going to happen anyway. Like it just seems like I'm so cynical, but it just seems like a really like not serious campaign. But like we can like I think as you listen to the speech, and we'll go through it, but I think his point is to co-opt people like me and you to vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I think that's the big picture, and that's why I think there's 100 million people who don't vote. Like so he's reaching out to the people who don't vote and saying, "Hey, vote for a Democrat." Like, don't get too caught up on him saying vote for me, because that's not a serious thing, because that's not how the Democrat Party works. Like, part of getting DNC funding, part of being a Democrat is you have to endorse whoever the DNC endorses.
But don't you have to be a Democrat? You have to be a registered Democrat in order to vote for which Democrat.
Yeah, you have to be in the primary states.
So then, who the fuck is a registered Democrat anyway? Who's going to be voting for these people?
It's a good question, and that's that kind of thought process to take is like, what's really going on here? Why are we so like?
Yeah,
is he really running a serious campaign? I think he's trying to co-opt us. So let's you can listen to a little bit more of this, because I think he does a good job kind of highlighting where I'm at. Huh?
You tell me when to stop.
Oh. Yeah, you can keep going.
Fairness, let me just make this point. We'll tell people, well, the lockdown wasn't my idea. It was my bureaucrats rolled me on it. I was saying we shouldn't do it. But that's not a good enough excuse. He was the President of the United States. And as Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. On May 2nd, 2020, 600 doctors signed a letter to President Trump begging him not to allow the lockdowns. And they said, because at that time, all of the pandemic protocols anywhere in the world, the WHO, CDC,
like
everywhere,
this is
the
all
European
facts.
Health Agency,
this is all facts.
All says you never do mass lockdowns. It causes much worse havoc and deaths and injuries than if you do the standard protocol, which is you lock down the sick, you protect the vulnerable, and you let everybody else go back to work. Otherwise, you are going to wreak havoc. And of course...
All right, so that's probably a good place to stop it for there. So, like, he's definitely, I think that particular part kind of highlights how, like, he's definitely appealing to, like, me. He's definitely appealing to the people who are pissed at the way that they handle the COVID and lockdowns, kind of the people who are caught up in, like, seeing through the bullshit. He's definitely appealing to those people. So I think it's important, before I go into the rest of it, where he kind of tries to co-opt us, where we see that he's targeting a different group of people and trying to bring them into the Democrat Party, right? With that kind of language is not a typical liberal shit.
These are in the background here. Like, what kind of?
I mean, they're probably paid, dude.
Yeah, you're
Dude,
right.
I used to work for a marketing company where they would just like send out emails and be like,
Oh
"Hey,
yeah,
we
no,
need you."
I know they do this. I've seen you know, I've seen jobs on Indeed. I'll jobs on like job links. I'll see for Indeed for literally the DNC to go like canvas them.
Dude, it's like, come on. Like
They'll
I
pay you.
remember,
You want to make $16 an hour? Go canvas
dude,
New York
dude,
City
sidebar, we
Democratic
did that
Party.
once at freaking
Mhm.
what's the name of it? That freaking Ninja Warrior, the American Ninja Warrior. They were filling out seats and they're paying us like $18 an hour, and they're like, "Don't tell the people who bought the tickets."
Jesus.
It's fun, dude.
The bureaucrats, the bureaucracies are owned by the industries. I'm talking about, NIH and EPA and CDC and FDA and DOT. A train wreck would not have happened in East Palestine except we have a captive agency at DOT. Our food is terrible because the food companies and the pesticide companies own USDA. We're in constant wars because the military-industrial complex, the big contractors, own CIA. Now, I want to make this clear.
So listen, very important.
I do not believe that everybody at the CIA is a bad person. My daughter-in-law, Amaryllis, who is one of the top officers on this campaign.
Yeah.
Cringe.
Oh
And
my.
do you want like I kind of did some like very little research on Amaryllis, but like
All right.
she
No, this is interesting. Yeah. No, I like it.
she was straight up a spy. Like not like non-official capacity. She would go over to other countries as a non-registered asset and freaking like be a spy. And like she got married to
I
Bobby
love how they
Kennedy J
mention
RFK.
Union Williams.
They met at Burning Man, like really, like just a totally friend, like a mutual friend introduced us. Like I didn't look too much into it because it's like a rabbit hole, but like, do I really believe that the CIA agent just happened to meet a freaking Kennedy at Burning Man and now she's like running freaking RFK Jr.'s campaign? So like, and he's like, oh, like they're so nice, like they're not all bad. Like he goes on in that speech and he says like like most of the 22,000 who work in CIA are good people. Like he's totally fawning for freaking intelligence.
which is
So
such
very problematic.
strange behavior for a Kennedy. Really, I mean, I wouldn't expect this at all.
Well, and that's kind of goes back to what I'm thinking, where like every Kennedy has been watched by the CIA since they came out of the womb.
Oh yeah,
So,
and like I threw in some Joe Kennedy clips in there too, but like his ancestors aren't the best people either.
like
But
it's just so it's obvious to me that like
they were
like
kind of like the first grifters, actually. Not Joe Kennedy, John Kennedy.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think so. Anyway, we can keep playing it, but yeah, she's she's definitely involved, and yeah, let's play it.
she just signed a non-official cover.
Yeah, so basically, she wasn't registered as a foreign asset. She would go over, and she wouldn't be. It means that when she went over to other countries, she would pretend to have another job or be working as like a journalist or a reporter or something, like, and wouldn't be like when she introduced people, she's not a CIA agent. She's not working for the State Department. She's not working for the Pentagon. She's like a journalist, American journalist, or she's American freaking reporter, or she's like, do you ever remember hearing those articles once in a while where like a plane got grounded because a journalist was found and they were taking him into custody? You ever hear those articles
Yeah,
once in a while?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's the same thing. Same thing. Like she's a fucking straight up spy in unofficial capacity, which means like she didn't have her name as CIA in the books,
Probably
which
like a
also
honeypot
means
or something.
could be. Well, I mean, she's married to a Kennedy, so maybe. But
Probably like all slimy like that. Yeah.
but what's also funny is that she said she retired from the CIA in 2010, but if she was hired into the CIA in non-official and did non-official work, that means that she very likely could still be working for the CIA in unofficial capacity,
Either way, it's
off
a
the books.
revolving door. They're in and
It's
out.
just dude, like I just think that like I think us as like intelligent individuals need to just like put up like a hard barrier where you see CIA. Okay, CIA, okay, you're bad news. Like, you've done more bad than good. Like,
I think that's a
and
good approach.
it's
Honestly.
just like that's my like I was telling somebody on Twitter the other day, like not trusting the CIA means never being a sucker.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, but he has a little bit more to say.
No good CIA. Let's just think that the
Yeah, I don't think anybody retires from the CIA anyway either. And there's like plenty of like independent media that like have CIA guests on, like Kiriakou or McGovern and stuff like that. And like
I was gonna make that
they
argument. Like
they have like they know their shit. They like say some interesting things. I think at the end of the day, they are limited hangouts. Like they're not telling us everything. Like I think that they also like, I don't know. I've always like internalized like that you never stop working for the CIA. Whether you like retire one day, that doesn't mean you just like suddenly don't have like CIA indoctrinated ideology into your skull after spending a career with them. You know, you're still going to kind of think like a CIA agent. So that's why I don't think you can get away from that kind of like indoctrination and expect not to be like kind of like supporting the US agenda. Like, so that's why I don't take them. That's why I just like it's bad news.
Yeah. All right, let's.
There's a little bit.
Her entire career as a clandestine agent for the CIA, as a spy in the weapons of mass
Wait, should I go to 116?
No, keep playing it.
destruction program in some of the most dangerous parts of the earth. And I've never met anybody with such courage. And that's how most of the 22,000 people at CIA are. They're people who are patriots.
That's good. So the takeaway there, he's literally saying that everybody at the CIA is fine, most good people. They're all patriots, all good people. Never met more valorous people, like totally fawning, like I would suck their dick for days. Like awful, cringy shit for RFK to say. You know, and then in the same sentence to be like, oh, like I'm not really influenced by my freaking like daughter-in-law. Yeah, okay. And like I've seen RFK for years, like for like through all the COVID and stuff. Like I know he's had some really good takes. Did you read his book? I didn't read his book.
I did. It's pretty like I'm not gonna discount RFK for his work on like exposing the NIH and a lot of these
Fauci
institutions, like because he's done some great work. It just grifting can come in different forms, and not many people not many forms the grifter like realizes it. They could be, kind of co-opted by like their fame or whatever.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show here is I think he's just an opportunity for us to get co-opted. But yeah, you can go to
whether or not it's purposeful. It's sheep herding 101.
So now he starts talking about.
All right, I'm going to talk about
Ukraine.
This is
one last subject, and it's a big one. So settle down. I want to talk about the war in Ukraine, and we need to have a national conversation about this war. We need to have a mature conversation that allows for nuance and that allows for complexity, and we need to do it respectfully. We can't be telling one side that they're Nazis and the other side that they love Putin. Everybody in this country...
Let's pause it for a second.
Yeah, so, isn't that he is kind of like he is giving a little bit of credence to the
he's both sidesing this bullshit. He's getting ready to both sides the fucking Ukraine war. Okay, that's fucking cringe. Like, so like this, you laugh because it's like, man, we like liked RFK's takes for the last couple of years, and I'm like listening to his freaking like war brain, like, and it's just so cringe. Anyway.
Yes, Nick, Afro Man is running.
Totally both sides and getting ready to both sides of the Ukraine war.
My opinion, Afro Man is the best candidate on the ballot right now. I'm serious. I'm 100%.
I believe it, but I mean there's also vermin.
And we have to respect differences of opinion, and we have to respect the people's capacity to ask questions. And, some of the issues that have we need to talk about is, number one, is this war in the U.S. national interest? We just need to isolate that question. Is it in the U.S. national interest? And there are, some of the leading pangerms of most respected people of our national diplomats, let's say Henry Kissinger, Jack Matlock, Larry Wilkinson, who's Colin Powell's chief of staff. They all have said definitively, if you just want to ask, is it in our national interest? It is not. It is not in America's national interest to push Russia closer to China. That is a cataclysm. Number two, it's not in our national interest.
Yeah, that does sound a little bit like a
straight up neocon talking point right there.
It does sound like a little bit like cable news talking point. Like,
dude, crazy.
Russia and China are banding together.
Yeah,
they want to defeat the U.S. Like, I mean, maybe it's
cringe.
a little bit of a framing issue, but I don't know. There's a lot of things that are giving me red flags here.
I mean, here's the thing: is that like we could have listened to more of like the first hour of this speech, but like I wanted to kind of show that it was like the speech started off with like kind of appealing to us, and then it takes this hard freaking turn where like the U.S. had
in the last hour.
Yeah, it like takes a hard turn to like kind of support the deep state and support the fucking war machine, but we have to like show nuance when we do it. And he like talks about it has to be for humanitarian reasons, not for imperialism. And it's just like he ends up both sizing it and trying to justify U.S. for being over there when there's no reason. There's no reason. And he doesn't even really talk about NATO encroachment or really like the fight in Donbass since 2014. He just tries to.
A lot of these people, like, I mean, and I was talking to a couple people about like Medea Benjamin too. Like in her book, she barely mentions the history of the Donbass and like the whole like terrorism going on in Crimea, Kiev, and they I think that's context that people need to understand in order to like know that it's not just a Russian just wake up one day.
It's just crazy disingenuous because like you can't say like Russia never should have like done the military operation and then like just pretend that we weren't like doing a freaking coup and Euromaidan didn't happen in 2014 and that Victoria Nuland wasn't like talking about freaking overthrown like freaking almost a decade ago. Like you can't just like ignore that part. And so like when they say like it's like, so when he's like, oh, we need to have like a good reason to go there, like a humanitarian reason, motherfucker, we're the reason that there's a war there in the first place. Like
if you look in the Cuban Missile Crisis, like when the Russians did it to us, like we fucking invaded them. You think that it is so disingenuous to say that like no other country wouldn't have done the same exact thing. Any other country.
I'm of the opinion that it's not really. That's why I like don't use the word invasion because like it what Russia did is nowhere near the same thing as the U.S. invading Iraq or Afghanistan. Not even in the same ballpark, not in the same universe.
Not even
so when we say Russia invaded Ukraine, we're trying to freaking put it into the same box as what the U.S. did with Afghanistan, Iraq, and Americans have already kind of like internalized that and used that language, so it's easy to kind of apply it in that way.
It's already the Holocaust 2.0.
Yes,
Ukrainian genocide somehow. I mean,
I just think
telling themselves they've been executing Russian-speaking Ukrainians for the past 8 years, and you want to say that's not Ukrainian genocide? Okay.
Yeah, so him to just like try and both sides and trying to find a way for Americans to justify being there when it's our fault that we're there in the first place is just cringe.
Do something that could involve us in a nuclear exchange with a country that has more nuclear weapons than us.
Okay, so this is also a very interesting point to make. So he says more, not just like another country that has nuclear weapons, another country that has more nuclear weapons than us. So like, maybe I'm being pedantic, but I could
Russia has more.
Yeah, Russia has more nuclear warheads than the United States. But like that's kind
By a
of like
lot.
it's just. I mean, I think they have like 500 or no, like 2,500 or something like that. I don't know. It's a lot. It's crazy.
Okay.
But they definitely, yeah, they have more nukes than us. But like the point here is there's no, we should never go to like war with another country, especially one that has nuclear weapons. So like the fact that he qualifies it by saying only with countries that don't have as many nuclear weapons as us, like maybe I'm being pedantic, but I see that as him like again trying to like find ways for like Americans to be cool with
With like some militarism
conflict.
here and there. Like
Yeah,
having
for military
like
conflict.
the occasional coup in like Venezuela or something like that. But like not this Russia thing it's kind of like how Fox News hosts like they kind of like choose which war they want to be involved in. Like like a lot of like you'll see like a lot of like Russia hosts. I mean, sorry, Fox
Well,
News hosts that are like all over China.
China. And
Yeah,
that was the thing where like RFK said the thing earlier about China and Russia getting together. Like that's a straight up freaking crazy
yeah. It feels like
neocon talking
Republic. It
point.
feels like conservative bait is what it feels like.
Yeah. But again, it's also something that people, non-voters and the people who have been like watching RFK anyway are more familiar with that kind of like alliance that is taking place, I guess. Like we're more aware of like multipolarity and stuff like that, and he's kind of using it as like a kind of like a fear mongering thing. Like our 18, yeah.
Now,
This is
having
crazy.
said that, I want to say that we are in the Ukraine for all the right reasons.
Wow.
Disqualified.
Wow.
He said it.
I want to say that we are in the Ukraine for all the right reasons. We are there because we are a good people.
He might as well be Anthony Blinken.
It's fucking crazy.
He might as well be. He might as well just be Anthony Blinken.
Dude, it's like this is why like
he might as well.
we went into this thing with RFK. We're like, all right, let's see if there's like some weird CIA connection. And like I don't necessarily think there's like some weird CIA connection, other than I think that he's just like heavily influenced by the CIA and it's like rotted his brain. And like so, and now it's his job to turn people like me, people like you, people like our viewers into freaking Democrat voters who support freaking humanitarian good wars. So it's just a crazy. And he spends half of his speech talking about freaking the war machine and the deep state. Like, come on, man. Like, so what's really important here?
I had a little bit.
And Abraham Lincoln said, "America is a great nation because we're a good nation." And
America's simping.
We continue to be a good people.
I mean, this is just.
And we are there because of our compassion.
Something you'd expect a Kennedy to say. Invoke some dynastic freaking.
And have shown extraordinary valor and courage defending their country and defending, their families and their beliefs and their liberties and their independence. Things that Americans have to admire. My own son, Connor, I'm very, very proud.
Oh, yeah.
Connor joined the Foreign Legion and fought in the Ukraine and during the Karkiv offensive as a machine gunner for Special Forces.
Also, Special Forces. Yes, these Special Forces. So just to kind of pause it for a second, get the full picture of his immediate family. You have CIA, freaking.
His family hates him too. Like they don't even really want.
Yeah, and I saw some articles on that, but like his daughter-in-law, who's running his campaign, is CIA. His son is freaking special agent or what? Was it like?
It's covered with military.
So there's like intelligence and military all over it, and I think that impacts his judgment. And yeah, it's clear now why he's a Democrat, why he's running Democrat.
Absolutely, 100%.
But I think that we need to know as Americans, and we have a right to know, what is our government's chief objective in this war. Now, we were told initially that the objective was humanitarian. And that is a good reason to be there, a humanitarian. And what that means is trying to end the bloodshed and minimize it as much as possible. But in recent times, President Biden said that one of our objectives, at least, is
so let's pause it for a
regime
second. Let's pick it
change.
up in a second. But like we knew from the very beginning. Like RFK's, I'm listening to this again. RFK is playing a little dumb here because everybody who was like paying attention knew from the beginning that the U.S. had no business over there. Like Scott Ritter was saying since like the first or second month we were there, it's unwinnable war. It's not going to happen. Like this is just like a war of attrition. And so he's talking about humanitarian. Either he's like just pretending that he didn't know what was going on, or he's like just ignorant. And I don't think that's the case, because like I don't really believe him that he's saying he didn't know that it was a proxy war, that was a war of attrition, that it wasn't in the name of humanitarian aid at all.
Of Vladimir Putin. And this is the same strategy that did not work well for us in Iraq. And it's many of the same people who are around the neocons, who are around President Biden, who have been talking about that for a long time and have been engaged in geopolitical machinations in the Ukraine since 2014. And then President Biden's Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, validated President Biden's statement by saying that our objective in the Ukraine is to exhaust and degrade the Russian army so they're incapable of having battles anywhere else in the world. Now, and indeed,
That was the goal since day one.
Many of the steps that we've taken in the Ukraine have seemed to indicate that our interest is in prolonging the war rather than shortening it. So if those are our objectives, to have regime change and exhaust the Russians, that is completely antithetical to a humanitarian mission. If it's
So okay, that's probably
language
good.
is just so.
It's just like he's like spent, he said in the beginning, like, we need to show some nuance with this war, and then he just bullshits for 25 minutes to make you kind of forget that like war is bad. I can find
reasons.
I'll find a good reason to start a war. I'll find a good reason. Like, it's very, very concerning. So I mean, that's pretty much what I had for that. It could have went going, but there's like, I think at this point people kind of get the picture that, like, again, it's like the same thing we did with Marianne. I think Marianne was like disqualified the minute that she starts having an opinion on freaking war. Like, these people, these Democrats are very consistent in supporting the war machine and finding reasons to start war. And like RFK, like I said, I listened to a lot of him. He was on a lot of different shows, and I was watching him over the last couple of years, like seen him plenty of times. And he was like one of those voices I like to see in terms of like COVID and all that stuff. But man, like, do not want to see this guy as a president. And like, as I was saying, I don't even really think he's seriously running. Like, he's just another shepherd.
I also just don't, I don't. I think this is like a big. It's more or less grift, but to sell books.
Okay. That's. I mean, I guess that's fair. I mean,
like, I mean, like,
here's another question I want to like just ask people, like, just on principle, because people think we live in a democracy. He's a fucking Kennedy. Like we already had a Kennedy. It's like, why do we? It's like the Bushes. It's like, why do we as Americans somehow think we live in a democracy, and then we end up voting for these dynasties over and over and over again? Like, we should just like pump the brakes on that and just kind of like, no, maybe one Kennedy is good. Like, yes, like we have some good memories of the previous Kennedy, but maybe let's not have another one, because that's not how democracy works.
Well, American culture is like particularly different because we have like this like infatuation with political figures and dynasties, and they just have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Obama's turning into one too, but I don't think he's like, his kids are.
Oh, they'll eventually.
Yeah,
they'll eventually. You know that'll happen, but it's just Democrats are all the same when it comes to war, man. They're all the same. I'm seeing the same thing. Like, who else is going to run for Democrat that hasn't thrown their their name in yet, or do we pretty much have everybody at this point? Who hasn't officially announced that we think is going to run for president as Democrat? Jimmy Dore said he wasn't going to do it.
Joe Biden technically hasn't announced yet.
Yeah, but I mean, they canceled the debates. The canceling the debates is the same thing as them saying that like Biden's going to run, and it's like, and like again, like I don't know if people are aware, but like when you enroll to be a Democrat candidate for president, and you enroll to accept funding from Act Blue and be part of Act Blue, they make you like agree that if you like don't end up getting the nomination, that you have to put full force, you have to support the Democrat candidate that the DNC supports. You can't just go independent. You can't like endorse somebody
Yeah,
else.
they have a contract where you have to
They like that's the only way that they get
Yeah.
DNC funding. So like it's just really important to know that like looking at things that everything's going on, knowing if you know this rule and you know how the DNC operates, then you know that like RFK is not running a serious campaign, that eventually he's going to endorse Biden just like Marianne.